The branches from a pine tree crackle with embers of the warm fire it fuels. The 2.5-foot yellow, white, and orange flames lit the cool, crisp air this Tuesday night. It's just another day in the field with my team, training heavy machine guns, automatic grenade launchers, and anti-tank rocket launchers. We are Bravo Company, 3rd Platoon, Special Weapons Team. With a pretty long movement today, about 16 clicks to a pretty dense forest. The tall grass, brush, and all the sticker bushes were damp from the early morning storm. We had a pretty long day, and quite frankly, we were done with all the bullshit. We just wanted a break. My rifleman, Peterson, walked out into the woods, grabbed some kindling sticks and branches, or whatever he could find to get a fire going for us tonight. Max, Watson, John, and myself dug out a small fire pit and put some stones around it. "What the fuck?" we heard Peterson yell. "Fuck! God, please, no!" All 4 of us nearly broke our necks looking to our left at the horrifying screams Peterson. Honestly, you wouldn't pay much mind to it, but he was literally screaming for his life. Kind of like one of those blood-curdling screams you hear on some of those fucked up Halloween haunted house soundtracks. That wasn't it, though. We also heard growls. And not just any kind of growls. They were sheer hunger, bloodthirsty growls. Something big, very big, was in the woods with us, and we had no escape. Against our better judgment, all 4 of us decided to grab our headlamps and run in the direction of the noises. We could still hear Peterson still screaming, but the screams grew further and further away. He was running fast. But from what? What the fuck was in the woods? I feel I could speak on behalf of all of us when I say we were fucking terrified. We all had the gut feeling we were going to die. Die a horrible, fucked up death. We ran fast and hard through the thickets. Thorns and branches ripping through the flesh on our faces and torsos. Pure adrenaline rushed through our bodies. Peterson's screams grew further and further until they grew silent. A loud thud sound followed by an absolute blood-curdling moan. We could faintly hear the growls and what seemed like the sound of flesh being torn apart. The kind of macaroni sound you hear in the movies. Eventually, we all stopped running when we saw John stop dead in his tracks. He was trembling, but at the same time, stiff as a cement wall. His headlamp high-beamed through a couple low-hanging branches, bloomed with leaves. We turned our heads and looked in the direction of the blinding LED light. Honestly, nothing could ever prepare for us for what we saw. Nothing. And personally speaking, what I saw will haunt me for the eternity of my life. Let me stop there real quick. Before I go on, I have to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the one telling you the story, so you should know some stuff about me. I'm Darren. My friends call me DJ. I'm a staff sergeant in the United States Army. 4 combat tours: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Africa. I've seen some fucked up shit in my time in the Army so far. I'm a Special Weapons and Reconnaissance Team Sergeant, Sniper Qualified, Explosive Detonation Qualified, and SERE, Survive, Evade, Resist, and Escape School Graduate. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, bought the hat. I've seen children in the mountain villages in Afghanistan being ripped apart from their parents to be executed in public, either by bullet or by blade on their throats. I've watched children torn limb through a tiny scope on a high-precision rifle, and couldn't get authorization to take a shot on the assailant. I've watched village elders in Syria being executed in public by ISIS fighters. Beheading was their go-to. I've seen Somalian rebels in Africa kill, torture, and rape women and small children, and couldn't do anything about it. I've seen real evil. The kind of evil that only comes from the deepest, darkest layers of hell. I'll tell you right now, what I saw in those tours was nothing compared to the scene that we ran up to in those woods, and what lurked behind the bushes that was responsible for it all. Here I am, sitting with the boys out here in the woods. It's always nice to enjoy the little things in life, whether it be something simple, like hanging with a few good pals, or drinking some decent middle-shelf whiskey set as in a lawn chair under the stars. Life has always been pretty simple. At least it seemed that way to me. Maybe I have a skewed vision of what life really is. Or maybe I've seen enough shit in my life to really appreciate the simple things. Either way, the pure, unrelenting evil that I was brought up against was hands down the worst thing I've ever encountered. There was blood. Lots of blood. The ground was soaked in it. Trees splattered with it. Chunks of human flesh littered all around 15 feet or so radius of what was left of Peterson's unrecognizable body. Intestines strewed about, disconnected from the human body cavity that once hosted them. His face was half gone, his nose completely torn off, and his teeth and the jaw exposed on the right side of his face. His right eyeball was hanging on a tiny string, like flesh material from eye sockets. His throat completely torn open, an esophagus severed in half, hanging around his throat, kind of bobbing around. His legs were stripped to the bone, from his thighs to just below the kneecap. Large claw marks ripped through his side, exposing his ribs, and had a few even broken off, pointing to an almost 90-degree angle outside of his rib cage. his abdominal organs half eaten, half left alone. What the fuck happened to him? And what the fuck is in the woods with us? It was cold out. Not quite bone-chilling cold, but it was crisp. Peterson's blood was steaming. The smell was putrid. What was left of his body was still. Eerie still. Watson immediately turned his head and vomited violently on the ground beneath him. I almost followed suit, but I was able to hold it in somehow. Time stopped, and we were still as fence posts. "John," Watson said. "John! John!" John turned his head slowly towards Watson, his eyes engraved with terror and hopelessness. What the fuck could have done this? There are no grizzlies here. There are no wolves here. Black bears, sure, but not anything big enough to do this, John said. We all know that coyotes never really attack people around here. And the black bears were almost synonymous to ghosts around here. You never saw them. When you did, it was one or two here or there. They never really bother you. I have no idea what this was, but it's big. And you heard the noises they made. Yeah, they. There were multiple of them. We all heard more than one of those gnarling growls. Watson said first to John, and then planned his head towards us. It's true. We all did hear more than one. In fact, more than a couple. And the sounds they made running. You could tell they were absolutely massive. A moment or two later, we heard the growls again. The exact same growls we just heard before all this shit happened. They weren't just close. They were all around us. 360 degrees surrounding us. Heavy breathing, blowing almost like a deer does when they spot you while hunting. And deep, hungry growls. We all jumped back a little. God damn it, we are fucked! I said, not quite to myself, but probably too quiet for any one of those other guys to hear me. This is it, I thought to myself. This is how I'm gonna die. Deep blue and yellow, bedly eyes began to appear in the tree lines surrounding us. They were full of avarice. Whatever all those sets of eyes wanted, we all knew they wanted us. 6 sets of eyes, now locked on us, like a lion stalking his prey. They didn't blink, didn't move, didn't squint. They were focused. What was most odd about these eyes were that they were about 8 or so feet above the ground. Out of nowhere, Max decided to shine his headlamp towards the eyes in the woodline, and we all followed suit. As the beams passed over the area, over the eyes that a body should have been, there was nothing. Even the eyes seemed to disappear when the light hit them. At this point, we all knew this wasn't anything from this world, and we had 0 chance to escape. We had zero chance to survive. This was what we face with. We were going to die, and there was nothing any of us could have done about it. We were going to face the same brutal, horrendous death Peterson had just faced. Whoosh! A strong gust of air rushed past us, all around us. The eyes had disappeared, and the gusts of the wind were surrounding us, moving in a fast rotation. Screams, growls, blood-curdling moans, and the whistles of the wind consumed us. The rotation grew smaller and smaller around us. It was pulling us in together, and it was doing it quickly. Flesh began to rip apart from our faces and any exposed skin we had on our bodies. We were being attacked. All of us. The screams, moans, and growls grew louder and louder and closer. Watson was slammed to the ground. Something was pinning him down. His flesh started peeling off of his bones. He was screaming. The amount of anguish and pain you could hear in those screams made me vomit. It was horrifying. Blood and flesh started spattering everywhere. He was literally being ripped apart violently. His screams soon turned to moans and cries for help. But then fell silent. His body still being torn apart even after he had passed. We were all about a foot apart from each other now, as the gust grew closer and closer. By this time, Watson was nearly stripped to the bone and was out of the circle of wind we were in. In an instant, Max now was violently thrown to the ground. He was pinned so hard that his femur bones snapped, and John, myself, we were thrown off balance. Max screamed in pain from his first femur break, which was visibly a compound fracture, meaning the severed half of the bone was protruding from his thigh. He soon faced the exact same fate as Watson had just faced. Max was torn apart. I could only describe the violence of the slaying as if someone was fed through an industrial-sized wood chipper. John and I managed to get back on our feet. We ignored the slaying that was partaking in front of us. We had to. If we didn't want it, we would have consumed our minds. I reached in my right cargo pocket for my uniform pants. I had a flare. I forgot to put it in there earlier, in the range. I popped the cap and ignited the flare. The gusts almost instantly stopped, as if time had just quit, as if the earth had stopped spinning. It was near silent. So silent, we had both froze in place. Not the smartest thing in the world to do, but if you were in our shoes, you undoubtedly would have done the same thing. Whoosh! Another extreme gust of wind pins myself and John on the ground. "This is it, brother," I said, turning my eyes towards him. "We had a decent ride." John and I deployed together back in 2018 to northern Syria. We were on separate teams, but we were still wingmen. John had my back through all the bullshit. If I was gonna die, I wanted to die next to him. Searing pain followed by what felt like a hot serrated knife ripped through the flesh on my right shoulder, tearing the brown t-shirt I had on. Blood poured out of the 3 jagged slices from my shoulder to my chest. I was drenched in warm, sticky blood. The pain was numbing, almost as if not to feel at all. Another slash, then another, and another. One on my right thigh, the other on my left rib cage. At this point, the pain was numb. I couldn't even feel it anymore. I'm not sure if it was adrenaline or the nerves in my body that had been severed. I just lay there, in a pool of my own blood and flesh, making peace with God. Whatever was ripping me apart was on top of me. Blood poured over my face and into my eyes from a gash I had on my forehead, blinding me so I couldn't quite tell where I was. All I can describe to you is the creature was over 8 feet tall. Long, muscular legs that had skin rotting off of them. A smell of pure, sun-rotted roadkill. The creature's torso was short and not prominential to the rest of its body. Its arms hung from its shoulders down nearly to the ground. Hands hosed jagged razor eye-like claws. Its face. Fuck. It makes me tremble just recalling it. It was slim and oblong. Almost an oval. Its teeth were every bit of 3 inches long and jagged. Some were pointing down. Some were hooked to the left and the right, and curled backwards towards the roof of its mouth. The creature's eyes were blue, with little yellow-white stripes on one of the left of the iris, and one on the right. It had mangy hair, almost completely matted. You could mistake them for being dreadlocked, but they weren't. I could hear John screaming in agony, and then silence. I can't quite tell you how I survived that. Nor can I really describe the experience fully to you. This story, in your imagination, cannot quite grasp the horror of that night. The attack ceased, and I lay there numb, bloody. My loss of blood. My vision is almost non-existent, and I felt faint. By this time the blood had dried, and the rain had washed most of the crust over the red chunks of my face. I muster up enough strength to look over in John's direction, but I wish I wouldn't have. My best friend, the man that saved my life multiple times over, was lying there lifeless, his body completely unrecognizable. And he didn't deserve that. 2 weeks later, I sat there on the edge of the cliff outside of the woods. It will forever hold the cryptic key to the most purest form of evil. I thought about the events that had just occurred 13 days earlier. I looked down at the valley beneath me. I'm not a religious man, but I say a prayer anyways. Keep me safe from the evils within. Guide me to the direct path of salvation. Have mercy on my soul, and lay my brothers down east. As I walk through the valley of death, give me strength to find what it is and kill it once and for all. Amen. I sat there silently for about an hour, under my breath, hoarse voice crackling. I'm going home. I'm going back to Ohio.